Hello and welcome to my latest presentation in my new video and discussion series called The Peripheral Perspective. A big thank you to those of you who have been discovering me and liking and sharing and subscribing. It's been really cool to see that my own experiment with creativity is appreciated and landing well. I am very much looking forward to sharing with you what I have put together all about behavior for survival. Behavior for Survival 101. And like with most things that I end up putting out there, there's some kind of a personal reason. And in this case, it's because it's a topic that is intrinsically connected, entwined with who I am as a unique being and what it is that I transmit to others. So for those of you who are discovering me for the first time, my name is Melanie Halpert. I am a 5'1" quad right splenic projector, left angle cross of wishes. So I'm very, very investigative. I love getting deep into things. And when I feel solid enough in my foundation, then it's time to universalize my message. I'm definitely here for those who recognize and invite my guidance. Natural advisor, 20 years in the field of holistic health. And since 2008, I am a certified body talk practitioner. So yeah, I guess it's been about 13 years now that both in person and virtually, I've been helping people with all kinds of stuff, whether it be pain, mental or emotional stuff, guidance on their life path, etc. And I am now a certified Living Your Design guide and a human design analyst in training. So one of the kind of big reasons behind my presentation today is, as I mentioned, because of what it is that I am here to be recognized for and what it is that I am consistently broadcasting into the environment and literally putting into other people. So, in every design, other than for our reflector friends, we all have something called definition. And this is what's colored in our design and what it is that is kind of fixed and reliable and always on. So for me, I happen to have two channels. This is the life force in my design. And it's these lines that connect these shapes. So these shapes are centers in the body graph. They're energetic hubs. And for me, they're all connected in one continuous flow. And the 1057 is the channel of perfected form, a design of survival. This is actually what is called my authority defining channel. This is what defines my splenic center, which is really what it is that I can trust infallibly to make healthy decisions. It is this immediate, moment by moment, intuitive awareness. And for me, it's not even conscious. It's all unconscious. My guiding light, my northern star, it's by being really deeply anchored in my body's knowing moment by moment. And so this channel of perfected form, one of the things that Ross said about it is one of the things to recognize about the deep creativity inherent in the 1057 is that because it is purely individual and because it is mutative, they truly can change the environment that we live in. They can literally mutate that environment and change those who are within that environment as a result. So this is one of my gifts. One of my gifts is really, in a mutative way, changing the environment around me, mutating that environment, and even changing the people who are within that environment without even trying, just by being me. And then my other channel, the channel of the Alpha, a design of leadership for good or bad, it really is a channel of leadership. And both of these things ultimately need to be recognized in me. It's not something that I'm like, hey, look at this, look at this. But the Alpha is tremendously influential. And what Ra had to say about that is the Alpha is nothing without its ability to be able to influence the other, which means that the Alpha, in its understanding of the pattern, cannot simply benefit from the pattern alone. It's pointless. In order for them to be able to fulfill what is their role, they need to get others to follow the pattern. And so, with these two consistent aspects of life force always on in my design, I really am here to lead those who recognize and invite my guidance towards a safer future by perfecting their form for survival. And what's kind of amusing to me is that before I ever got into human design, I remember having an astrology reading, and I was told that I am literally a lion tamer and trainer, that I am here to kind of whip people into shape, taking their, I don't remember exactly what he said, but something about taking their baser nature and kind of like elevating them up to a higher level. And so that's why I put this warning sign with a whip, because as a projector, one of the big things that I've learned is that, even though this is me, this is who I am, I'm not here for everyone. Not everybody is going to recognize this in me. Not everybody is going to invite this energy into their life. I used to find that really challenging, and more I'm starting to understand, just how all of that works on a mechanical level. One of the big things we're going to be talking about today is mechanics. And so ultimately, I'm here to condition others, so the correct others, again, those who recognize and invite my guidance, to decondition. Basically say, hey, all of this stuff that has been programming you your whole life, that has assimilated you and homogenized you and taken you away from who you truly are, I'm here to help them decondition that and to recondition them, to help other people modify their behavior so that they can thrive on this plane. Because so many times people are running around banging their head against the wall. No matter what it is that they do, they keep on hitting resistance and not knowing what to do about it. I mean, they've tried everything. And then at the end of the day, it always ends up coming back and wreaking havoc. So that's really kind of the root of this presentation, why I've decided to put it together. And there are 4 different segments here on the menu. I can't make any promises, but I will try in YouTube to make chapters that you'll be able to click and be able to navigate if there's something that you either want to skip or something that you want to go back to. I realize that in this day and age where we're very, very busy, and we oftentimes don't have a very strong attention span, that videos that are longer are kind of less enticing. But if this is of value to you, then you're definitely invited to watch whatever you have the energy for in the moment, bookmark it, and come back to it. So here on the menu, we've got behavior for survival, mechanics, not morality, resistance, useful versus useless, navigation, the map is not the territory, and your human environment, entourage, is everything. So starting with our first segment, behavior for survival, which, going back to my design, this is one of the big things that I am here about. What is and what does it mean to have correct behavior for survival? And really wanting to look at here this concept of mechanics and not morality. I remember first when I got into human design and I was reading about my design, one of the quotes about my channel of perfected form, it really struck me. And in this quote, Ross says, your behavior is relative to the environment. If you're walking through a jungle full of dangerous animals, you don't wear bright clothes and carry a boombuster loud sound system on your shoulder blaring away, you're going to die. Behavior isn't something that is set. The foundation of behavior is to know how to behave in different circumstances. It's how you survive. So this quote really, it really hit home with me. But at the same time, taken out of context, it actually can be very misleading. And a lot of what I will talk about in this presentation is about the ways in which this can be misinterpreted, misconstrued, and even used in a way that ends up, oftentimes totally unbeknownst to somebody, shooting yourself in the foot. I mean, obviously, yes, if you're walking through a jungle, you are aware that there is danger around you, these dangerous creatures that at any moment could come out and just devour you. So you're not going to do things to attract unwanted attention to yourself. But that concept is really still not quite what Ra is getting to. And so in this segment, working with this concept, mechanics, not morality, we all have our own personal law of gravity. This is the way that our unique configuration interfaces with the world around us. And just like Newton and the apple falls down from the tree, you're never going to see an apple falling upwards. Well, we all have our own law of gravity. Not everybody's apple falls down, even though, yes, we know the law of gravity, but we each have our own unique law of gravity. There are certain mechanics that govern our configuration and the way that we operate in the world. This is something that is very this or that, black and white. It is not, there's really no, like ambiguity. And this is something that you start to learn. Like, yes, even though there are in areas, places that you need to kind of see where you can take things, at the same time, there are certain mechanics that are very stark. And something that becomes very quickly tangible, not only as for the people that decide to study human design, but even experimenting with your own design, which is the whole purpose of everything. It's that your mechanics don't care if you are a good, quote unquote, good or quote unquote bad person. So many of us strive, and I mean, this can come from many places in our design. We strive to be a good person. We want to be either for ourselves or to be seen in a certain light as a good person. We think, well, if I do these things, then I'm going to attract good things, or I'm going to have an easier time. And conversely, there's other people too that have the mindset of, well, if I do this or that other thing, then I'm going to be able to get around this obstacle or overcome this. It's kind of like a shortcut. Then I'll be able to reach the goal that I want, or not get caught doing this, or there's all kinds of things. But whether you are the most exalted angel or the most, lowly criminal demon, correct behavior for survival has nothing to do with morality. If you don't have the correct behavior, you're going to stand out. It's not going to work. You're not going to love yourself. This is at the core of our nature. So many human beings suffer in the world, particularly on the material plane, because they don't know how to survive. What that comes down to is that they don't know how to make a decision. It isn't anything else. No matter how profound this knowledge is, no matter how deep you can go, it still begins with the same mechanical premise. And so the mechanical premise that Ra is talking about in this quote has to do with the ability to make a decision. Everything in terms of our mechanics working correctly ultimately comes down to the ability to make healthy decisions from the place within us or a personal process that we can infallibly trust. That has nothing to do with the mind. So one of the really big themes that I wanted to weave into this presentation is this whole concept of gaming the system. And so just like with that slide before that showed the Buddha and the saint and the criminal and the demon, whether you're trying to game the system by being this really good person or gaming the system by being sneaky in some way, this was a perfect time to bring Albert Einstein's quote into the presentation. No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. Now, why did I include this in the presentation, you ask? Well, it's because so much of this gaming the system has nothing to do with who we are as nine-centered beings in the now. Some of you may already know this, but some of you may not. In 1781, we underwent a massive mutation. And we went from the traditional seven-centered Homo sapien, and we shifted into a nine-centered being. So right now we're actually on the cusp of another mutation in 2027. It's like this chapter in time, 1781 to 2027, the Plutonic interregnum. But the thing is that this whole perspective or like quest to game the system is all rooted in our ancestor, the seven-centered being, who was designed to be very, very strategic and operated very much from a mental place. But this does not work for us anymore because we are no longer this being. And that's why I use that quote from Albert Einstein, because we are trying to solve this problem by operating out of old ways that are not working for us anymore. All they do is lead to resistance and suffering. Something very profound to understand about our ancestors is that you have nothing in common with anyone born before 1781, despite the illusion. You have a totally different inner system. You're wired differently. We may look similar on the surface, but we are not. And the difference isn't simply that we're wired differently in the infrastructure, we are biologically different. So that's a quote from Ra. And one of the big things here is that as nine-centered beings, we are not designed to make mental decisions. The mind can be wonderful to analyze, to compare, to measure. It's incredible as an outer authority for other people, but for us to make decisions, it is utter and complete garbage. So in your own body graph, whether you have this triangle here that's circled, colored in green, or whether it is not colored in, either way, whether the ajna is defined or undefined, it is still not meant to make decisions. And it's when we're liberated from making decisions that our outer authority becomes a source of knowledge for others. Our mind is here to shine for others, but it cannot do that when we are using it as our own decision-making authority. And just reiterating here that there is no gaming the system using a seven-centered approach. So I've kind of divided it into kind of two categories here, that we can be relying on our quote unquote smarts. So this is where we try to use this mental or strategic manipulation to game the system, to get what we want, to get what we think we want. And also living out our not self-conditioning. And this is oftentimes kind of in the way of coping. So in our design, we all have areas of openness. And this is where, well, not only is this our greatest wisdom potential, but this is also where we are conditioned. And the sad truth is that most of us are living out who we are not from these places, like a knee-jerk reaction to life. But when you do this, and you're really using these mental or strategic um, ways of getting your needs met, or when you're living out your not self-conditioning and you're just coping with life, eventually you will realize that all of these ways that you've been trying to game the system, well, actually, the system is gaming you. You think that you're trying to liberate yourself, but actually you're being kept in this insidious prison. And the way that you know is because it keeps on coming back again. The resistance keeps on coming back. No matter your design, there is no gaming the system using a 7-centered approach. So whether you're using the mind to make decisions, using the mind to create or to attract, and even so, this little grid here, this is something called variable in human design. So when you generate your chart, you're going to see that there are arrows in the design. If you're using official software anyways through Jovian Archive or mybodygraph.com or the new MMI online or MMI software, there are these arrows. And some people, through their variable, are designed to be strategic. But even at that, even if you are somebody who is designed to be strategic, this is something that will arise naturally, that has nothing to do with you mentally trying to control your reality. So I'm going to be introducing the limousine here. If you have not yet seen the kind of metaphor of the limousine, but the limousine basically represents our form, our body, this kind of the hardware that we have in this lifetime. And the software, which is our consciousness, the personality, who we think we are, is really designed to be here in the back seat, feet up, enjoying the ride. But what ends up happening is that we falsely believe that we are the driver, but we are not the driver. We are not at all in control of the vehicle. We are here to be a passenger enjoying the ride. Chances are, if you think something is what you must do to survive, it might be a means to an end, but it is likely not rooted in mechanically correct behavior and will be rife with consequences in the long term, if not in the short term. So that's like my own warning to you, and something that I invite you to even contemplate in your life. You know, all of these ways in which you have mentally engineered something, trying to game the system. And even if maybe in the short term it's satisfying or yields you results, that you still find yourself really burdened and not really free. It's kind of like, again, it could be a coping mechanism, or it could just be you trying to be a ninja in the matrix, outsmart the system, but it just doesn't work. So this leads us to our next topic, which is resistance. Useful versus useless. So even though resistance is not necessarily pleasant, sometimes resistance, especially if you are attuned to it in the way that it's designed to be attuned to, it could actually be the most useful, most amazing gift. And so kind of going further here with the limousine, but now working with this theme of resistance. So this is a, like the definition of resistance, but I highlighted the context in which we're working with it in this presentation. And it's really all about a force that tends to oppose or retard motion. This is when in human design, when we talk about resistance, this is really what it's all about. So it's something that, like it slows you down, it takes the wind out of your sails, it leads you to a dead end. It's like pushing a boulder uphill. So bringing it back to how, how things really are configured, how we have this limousine, which is, the vehicle, our body, and we've got this passenger in the back seat, which is the personality. And then we've got this thing called the magnetic monopole. So I put an image here of the G center, which is the center for identity, love, and direction. And the reason why I circled gate 2 here, whether or not you have gate 2 defined in your design, whether or not you even have your G center defined or not in your design, gate 2 is the gate of the higher self. And this is really truly the gate of the driver. And it's the magnetic monopole in itself, which is this purely attractive force that sits here in the G center. And so Leela Swan Herbert says, it is the monopole that pulls us along our specific geometry in life, which provides not only the life experiences, but the maturation process for the expression of what has been learned, our specific wisdom gathered in this life. So each and every one of us has a trajectory. We have this pathway through life that is really meant for us. And what ends up happening is that we don't trust in this at all. We think, well, I'm the one in control. I'm here to create my reality. I'm here, I'm in charge. I'm large and in charge, and I'm in control. So this was kind of funny that I found online, but it was this backseat driver's license. And that's the whole thing, is that when we get caught up in trying to control the direction and trying to control where we go on our trajectory, trying to control what happens along the journey, that is when we encounter resistance. So a lot of this gaming the system, we think we're being savvy, but it's actually keeping us from the best stuff in our life. Now, bringing something back from another presentation that I did on our signposts of resistance is this concept of the smoke detector and sensitivity. So this is really all about, as I mentioned earlier, the usefulness of resistance. What usually ends up happening, because most of us are living as not self or not aligned to who we are so often mired in the signpost of our resistance that we become almost numb to it. It's just like a way of life. So because it's so natural, it can't be used for what it's really here to be used for. And just like a smoke detector that keeps on going off every time you're just making food, no, it's like you need that smoke detector to be there for when there's an actual fire and it needs to save your life. So as you experiment with your design, as you start living your design, the resistance will show up less and less, but when it does show up, it's actually useful to you because it is indicating something that is very, very important. So if you're a manifester, there will be this deep craving for peace, the peace that comes from having freedom of movement to do what you want when you want. But manifestors, because they're often not operating in alignment, they struggle with recurrent anger. So whether they are outwardly angry or inwardly angry, there could be this deep, deep recurrent anger, and something that maybe they're ashamed about. But at the same time, if they were to be aligned with their design, when that anger arises in them, they have the capacity to say, okay, there's something off. There's something, and it's not that the anger is bad. The anger is showing them that there is something that has been overlooked. And it's the same thing with generators and manifesting generators who crave satisfaction. They are really here to use their energy in satisfying ways. And generators, when they're mired in resistance, can struggle with recurrent frustration. Projectors, we are here for success. It's not only about lucrative success, but it's just about sweetness and ease in our interactions. And when we are not operating in alignment with our design, we struggle with recurrent bitterness. Projectors can be the most bitter people on the planet, and they kind of just embrace it as a way of life. Well, not that they embrace it, but they're just always stuck in it. They don't understand that it is meant to be a tool for them. And with reflectors, they crave surprise. They're really here to be in awe. And oftentimes, again, not living their design, they tend to struggle with recurrent disappointment. So no matter your design, no matter your signpost, the signpost is really meant to be a tool for you so that you can course correct. Resistance indicates to us that on some level, we are not aligned to mechanically correct behavior. So again, doesn't matter how much of an angel you're trying to be, how compassionate, how loving to your neighbor. You could be trying to turn the other cheek, or, there's all of these things that we do from a place of being highly, highly conditioned that we then distort into a narrative. And yet at the same time, we don't understand why it keeps us feeling so miserable. It's because there is incorrectness in the way that we are behaving mechanically. So what it does is it just creates resistance in our life, which leads us to our next segment about navigation. The map is not the territory. Now, I possibly totally bastardized that quote because I know that the map is not the territory has its own meaning, but it was just kind of like what popped up for me when I was creating this segment. And I'm going to talk about it in the way that I relate to it. So one of my favorite quotes by Ra, which I use a lot, is life is navigation. If you're not moving correctly, you're going to miss what's there for you, and you will get the homogenized direction, nothing else. So, we oftentimes do not realize to what extent we live in this program, in this matrix that is constantly trying to homogenize us. Everywhere that we're open in our design is attracted to what we are not. This is where we end up blending in, being like everybody else, keeping up with the Joneses, instead of actually living according to what is fixed, consistent, reliable in us, what it is that we can trust, and who we really are. So what ends up happening is that if you are not moving correctly, if you do not have the correct behavior mechanically, all you're going to get is the homogenized direction. You're not going to get the life that is meant for you. You can be on your trajectory, but it's going to be completely convoluted, leading to all kinds of angering, frustrating, bitter, disappointing situations because you are not moving correctly. So the map is your body graph. If you have your birth data, you have the most freaking amazing map ever. In terms of our definition, what is defined in us, okay, we have these 13 conscious planetary activations and 13 unconscious planetary activations from the level of the gate all the way down to the level of the base. This is what we call nature and represent what it is that makes each and every one of us unique, what it is that differentiates one human being from another. Our definition is fixed and reliable, never changing, always on. It is what we broadcast or transmit into the environment around us and what we automatically put inside others, not by trying, but simply as a result of existing. When we live out our true nature, our frequency is clear. When we live out our conditioning, our frequency is distorted. And so you could see here, that was kind of, this is an image of my design, and this is my definition. And then I used a negative to kind of bring out my openness. And so what I wrote here about openness, what is undefined or open in us is not bad or broken or missing, but as opposed to our definition, these areas in our design are flexible and fluid. what we call nurture, where we're receptive and where we amplify what's being transmitted into the environment by others and by the cosmos. Inevitably attracted to what we are not, it is through our openness that wisdom is potentially cultivated by becoming aware of the ways in which these external forces condition us away from our true nature and distort our frequency when we identify with them as who we are. So if you're not already familiar with these concepts, then definitely, rewind, re-listen again, read what's on the screen, but really realize that this for you is your precious map that will tell you exactly who you are, who you were meant to be, and all of the ways your whole life that you have been acting out who you are not, identifying with who you are not, allowing other people to define and to know you by who you are not. So without getting kind of too deep into this, there's something called the cross of life. And what I did here was take an image of my own body graph, and I just highlighted the gates that make up my incarnation cross, which is basically our conscious and unconscious sun and earth, and also my conscious and unconscious nodes. So the vertical here, this is where we have our sun earth activations. This is the sun earth consciousness stream. It is the vertical. So this one I used a quote, another quote from Leela. When we get down to the specifics of our incarnation cross, we are looking at 70% of our neutrino imprint. These are the gates and lines or themes of our design and personality, sun and earth, through which we externalize our purpose. Our cross is not something we do, but what we are here to be an expression of and to embody through our practice with strategy and inner authority. It's not something we look up in a book and then figure out how to make it happen. And then for the nodes, I took a great little quote from Ra. The nodes, so the nodes are the horizontal. This represents our nodal environment, goes into our past and into our future. The nodes represent, in essence, our journey on this plane. And the journey, after all, truly is everything. Everything about the nodes points to what is possible for us on this journey. It lays the foundation for everything that seems to be important for us. The nature of our lives, the quality of our interaction with others, the perspective that we have that opens up the possibility for uniqueness of our outer authority. So just as the sun earths in our design, all of this kind of really represents our life work, our purpose, and the nodes are the stage upon which we live out our lives. So not only representing the environment of where we be, but also what and who we're designed to see. So we're not all designed to be amid the same types of environments. We're also not designed to see the same things. So you could see very clearly in our reality how much we're shoehorned in all, believing the same things, having the same opinions, knowing the same, being the same, when we are not in any way, shape, or form designed to be the same, think the same, see the same. We've got our own unique, differentiated perspective available to us anytime. It's just about getting to know who you are and who you are not. We are not here to be controlled. We are not here to follow some authority that's out there somewhere. We're here to live our truth, see the truth, so that you don't have to spend your whole life pretending, manipulating, trying to figure out how to. Instead, you can just glide through this process, and it's beautiful. So I love this quote because it really is talking about the the ease, the flow, when you're really aligned to who you are, you're making healthy decisions, you are aligned mechanically to correct behavior, and stepping away from gaming the system, right, with this manipulation, really aligning to who you are. However, so he says, we are not here to be controlled. We are not here to follow some authority that's out there somewhere. And yet, we are also not here to mentally control our behavior, our vehicle, nor the territory. So that's what I added in. Because yes, I mean, it is great to know that, no, we're not here to be controlled. The authority is not out there. But we also have to understand that the authority in here has nothing to do with the mind and how obsessed we are with mentally controlling our life. So the solution to this really all lies in strategy and authority. This is what helps you to mechanically, align to mechanically correct behavior that has nothing to do with being a good person, that has nothing to do with like certain tactics that are a means to an end. This has nothing to do with being a means to an end. It has to do with living life as yourself. So manifestors, they're here to inform their impact field, because manifestors are here to have impact. They are usually highly unaware of their impact. They are usually highly unaware of the fact that their actions actually affect other people, which is something that can create a lot of anger in the people around them and ultimately in them as well, because they're always hitting that resistance. So the necessity, and not from a place of it being even, like manifestors can do anything. They're the only type that are really not needing anybody outside of them to act. But at the same time, on a political level, the courtesy of being inclusive in their process to be able to get what it is that they ultimately crave, which is that peace, that freedom of movement. So informing their impact field before they act on something or not act on something. This is something huge that I've seen with manifestors, is that sometimes they will they say that they'll do something, and then for whatever reason, they decide not to do it. And that's totally fine. But when there are people that have these expectations that are based on what they said that they would do, and then they just drop off the map, ghost them, they don't inform them of their intention, like basically update them as to the current program, again, that's something that can really bring up anger. So next, we've got the generators and the manifesting generators, who are here to wait to respond. So they are not here to initiate. They're not here to make things happen. Highly magnetic. They're here to wait for life to come to them moment by moment by moment. They have this inherent capacity to respond to life according to what they are available for or not. And then we've got the projectors. So it's not just about, has nothing to do with waiting to respond for projectors. Our gift is the gift of recognition. And yet, if we do not wait for the recognition of others and the invitation from others to, to bond or to do, we're quite, I don't want to use the word handicapped, but we are in a way limited, because that is the magic key for us as projectors. It is that, recognition, being recognized and invited by the other, that allows us to truly step into our role, to shine our light. Just like the generators and the manifesting generators, we are not here to initiate. And the reflectors, they're actually here to wait to be initiated by the other types. And they have this very deep connection to the moon and to the lunar cycle. They are the only lunar beings, very rare, not even 2% of the population. I think now the statistics say it's about 1.45%. So for them to make a decision, they've really got to wait a full lunar cycle. Now, in terms of, decision making for all the types, there are different types of authority. And just as, we all have our strategy, something that I have really been working with deeply in my own process, in which I will, I hope to anyways, do a discussion panel about this concept, which is how our authority, whether it be our inner authority or some beings have a personal process of authority, this is non-negotiable. This is really kind of like the rock, the anchor of our entire, I guess you could say, mechanical correctness. But at the same time, strategy in some ways, is a guideline. And that's where I like to get a bit messy in my experiment. But yeah, we'll save that topic for another day. So anyways, there's different types of authority. Some beings are emotionally defined. It's their solar plexus that is their authority, and they're here to wait for clarity, for emotional clarity before they make a decision. Then we've got the sacral or sacral beings who are here to kind of respond to life moment by moment. They have a kind of an immediate knowing as to what they are available for or not. Then we've got our splenic beings, such as myself, who are very intuitive, instinctive, tasteful. We just know what is healthy for us or not when we are really in tune with that awareness. Then we have our ego beings. So some ego beings are manifestors, some ego beings are projectors. And the ego, the word ego gets a very, very bad reputation, but as an ego being, or whether or not ego is your authority, or if it's something that is defined in you, this is not something to be ashamed of. This is not something to try to transcend. It's something that is very much connected to the material plane. It's all about deals, bargains, supporting the tribe. And as an ego being, somebody who is actually either an ego manifestor or an ego projector, it really has a lot to do with will. Will, this is the center of will. Then we've got our G projectors. So the only type who will have this authority are projectors. And this is really all about, it's literally their higher self. They will speak from their identity. It is their higher self that speaks through them. And it's about following that. Then we've got our mental projectors who are very sensitive to the environment. They're very, very open. They're here to be very powerful outer authorities for others. And it's important for them to have these trusted advisors around them that they can use as sounding boards so that they can hear their truth as they discuss a potential decision. And lunar beings are reflectors. It's similar in that they also really need to have a group of trusted people in their life that they can speak to throughout a lunar cycle for them, because they're always changing with the moon going through the 64 gates. So ultimately, especially when it comes to a big decision, they really need to take that time to be able to have that kind of inner clarity to decide. So being a ninja in the matrix. I know a lot of you watching this are smart cookies, but the truth is that it is not about book smarts. Honestly, doesn't matter how intellectual you are. You cannot game the system using your intelligence, not in the long term. And nor is it about street smarts. So it doesn't matter how manipulative, how conniving, how calculated, how sneaky. It's not about that either. Again, resistance is always going to catch up with you. And I saw this quote the other day, and it was so beautiful. It was so beautiful that I was very touched by it. I was touched by it because, especially for manifestors who are really here to be moved by their inner authority, like that is what moves them into action. It has nothing to do with what they want, what they think they want, but literally to be moved, whether it's by their splenic authority, whether it's by their emotional clarity, or whether it's by their will, that it is that literally moves them into action. But I still wanted to include it for all types, all authorities, because ultimately, our authority is something that is not in our control. And that's what it is that we can trust inside of us. I will lead you to the river so you can remember how beautiful it feels to be moved by something that is out of your control. This is something that I feel that I bring to others through my definition, what I'm designed to be recognized for, the way that I will recondition them, the way that I will condition them to decondition, is really helping them to see how they have been operating using these behaviors that are not mechanically correct, not only for their survival, but for their ability to really thrive on this plane. So last but not least, we've got your human environment. Entourage is everything. So as a projector, one of the big things that we learn is that not only are we here to really master a system, because it's through mastery of a system, and it doesn't matter what that system is, but it's something that people are going to come and request our guidance, our counsel with that thing. It's like a projector without some kind of mastery is going to be completely lost in life, because we're here to kind of have that as our calling card. But it's not only projectors whose human environment is absolutely crucial. Every single type in their own way, their entourage is everything, because you don't really get to live out the life that is meant for you if you're surrounded by the wrong people. And what ends up happening is that when we don't have the correct behavior for survival, when we are mechanically incorrect, we end up being surrounded by the wrong people, and everything is distorted. So when we're distorted within, we're distorted without. So starting with our manifestors. Manifestors are here to have impact. And I could see how devastating it would be for a manifestor to be surrounded by people, whether it's your partner, whether it's your friends, whether it's your colleagues, but to be surrounded by people who, where either you feel you have no impact, or the impact that you do have is just constantly creating problems because you don't understand it. And you're also not surrounded by people who help you to see your impact. So manifestors, the only ones designed to initiate, manifestors are designed to initiate relationships and connections when moved by inner authority. So one of the big things that can happen with manifestors is that they sit around waiting. They sit around waiting for somebody else to initiate with them. And this can be very disempowering. It could bring up a lot of anger in them. And because they can be so afraid of rejection that sometimes they don't step into their true role. In many ways, they kind of are designed for rejection. They're designed to be able to handle that rejection. But many of them, because of their own wounding, because of their openness, they tiptoe around things and they don't really step into their power. Peace is their signature. So that peace that comes when they have that freedom of movement. And so when surrounded by the right beings, there will always be that sense of freedom of movement when they inform and initiate correctly with that person. And I mean, this is something that I've seen so hugely in my relationships. Not only is my partner of 12 years a manifestor, but I have many manifestors in my life. If you're particularly interested in manifestors, whether you're a manifestor or a projector or even any other type, one of my very first videos was all about the manifestor projector relationship. And so just having so much personal experience with this, I see how when I have manifestors in my life that keep me informed and they initiate with me, that I am always so happy to just give them whatever it is that they want, because I feel recognized and I feel included in their process. So that's something that for you as a manifestor, if you're watching this, that, to contemplate, it's like, wow, when I treat this person correctly, do I feel free within myself? Because a true ally will grant you that freedom of movement. So I feel like that in a way too is like a signpost. This person in your life, so in your entourage, sees you, helps you understand your impact. This person answers when you initiate. So I know that this is something that could be really difficult for manifestors as well, that sometimes they'll keep on initiating with somebody who keeps on rejecting them. And instead of saying, wow, this being is not correct for me, they keep on banging their head against that wall. So the right person will answer when you initiate. They might not always say yes, but they'll still answer you. They will still accept you. This person, so in your entourage, keeps you informed where appropriate. So they take that time to keep you informed as well. Manifestors need to be kept informed as much as they need to inform others. And then, of course, lastly, this person is a nourishing force. This is something that I've really been exploring in my own process, how, conditioning is conditioning, but not all conditioning is equal. Some people condition us and it just feels like shit. Whereas other people condition us and it can be really beautiful and we can learn a lot from it and it can be correct. A lot of it has to do with whether or not we've entered into that relationship correctly. But at the same time, throughout a relationship, whether this is a friend, whether it's a lover, whether it's a partner, whether it's a colleague, over time, you also get to see how am I affected by this? And yes, manifestors tend to they have a closed and repelling aura. They may not be as sensitive to these things as other types. And this is not to say that manifestors are not sensitive. They could be very, very sensitive, but sometimes just clueless as to things that other types really, really are very perceptive of. And this was something as a projectors we see extremely deeply. It was a manifestor friend of mine who really kind of drove that home, that she does not see what I see, and that it's so helpful for her when I tell her what I see, because if I don't, she's totally blind to it. So anyways, in your own process as a manifestor, the ability to just see, like, is this person a nourishing force or not? Generators and manifesting generators, designed to wait to respond via inner authority. So whether it's an emotional generator, a manifesting generator, or a sacral, this is all about availability. And when you have available energy for this person in your entourage, when you're channeling that energy into the relationship or just interfacing with them, there needs to be this deep feeling of satisfaction. If you're feeling drained, well, it could be that you have said yes to something that you don't have the energy for, or it could be that this is just not a correct being in your life. Ultimately, this person in your entourage sees you and encourages you to know yourself. You are here to know yourself. This person asks you, so they don't tell you things, they ask you, and they respect your response. They respect your availability or not. Again, this person is a nourishing force. So our ability to start to assess, and yes, obviously on some level, there has to be mental involvement to assess as to whether or not somebody is a nourishing force. But this is also something that can be felt deeply inside of us at the level of the body. We all even have something called cognition. And when we're operating correctly, our cognition, it's almost like an extrasensory, like the way that I feel about mine, I've got feeling cognition. I have a very, very powerful, energetic sensitivity. And oftentimes, when I am not aligned to my splenic inner authority, even that, I end up overriding it. And then I hit resistance, I get bitter. All of this stuff happens as a result of really not being tuned in to, these really important things. So when it comes to projectors, and it's kind of like an extra thing for projectors, is that we really must be formally invited into personal and professional relationships. So obviously, it's not always going to come with some kind of a fancy invitation, but at the same time, there's a certain distinctive flavor, like when somebody approaches you either in friendship, romantically, they want to work with you, there's some very almost like definitive energy behind it. It's not wishy-washy. It's not like a limp handshake. For us as projectors, that true feeling of recognition and invitation is like a strong, firm handshake. We can feel it inside of ourselves. And so we're really designed to wait for that recognition and invitation. And it's through our authority that we will either then accept or reject that invitation. We are here for success. So it feels successful when we're surrounded by the right others. There's sweetness and ease in our interactions with this person. And this is, again, something that has been more and more on my radar in my own experimentation, that where I can see that even though there may be elements of recognition in certain in certain relationships, and there could be aspects of invitation, that there's this very choppy, almost jarring energy that can happen. But for us, when it's right, there's just sweetness and ease. There's just this flow. There's none of that kind of jarring energy. The person in our entourage will recognize us deeply for who we are, and they will encourage our seeing. This is a person who will invite us into their life on whatever level, whether it's on a professional level, on a social level, on a romantic level, and they'll also invite us into activities. So, asking us, hey, would you like to go for a walk? Would you like to go have dinner with me? Would you like to, or even, hey, I saw this the other day and thought you might be interested in it. Would you like to know more about it? Inviting us into activities with them, but also inviting us into activities that could really nourish our mastery, our ability to advise and guide. And it always still comes down to, is this person a nourishing force or not? Do they nourish me or do they deplete me? Do they nourish me, or is it on some level toxic? What's going on? And then lastly here, we've got the reflectors. So the reflectors who are designed to be initiated by others and to wait a full lunar cycle to decide. Now, obviously, it's not always practical, always necessary to, for every single thing. And in fact, I have a reflector friend who I'd love to invite to that panel discussion I mentioned earlier about authority being non-negotiable and strategy being a guideline, because sometimes we can get so mentally kind of like wound up about something, like I have to follow this to the letter, that we're actually not flowing with what is correct for us. And that's why sometimes there can be, places that are a little bit more malleable. And so here we have surprise. Reflectors are here to feel awe and wonder. So for reflectors, when there is a correct person in their entourage, there could be this sense of awe or wonder when they connect with this person. And I personally have had an experience with, there's at least 3 reflectors in my life where every time I would connect with them, I could tangibly feel that sense of awe and wonder in them. And it wasn't about them worshiping the ground that I walked on or anything like that, but they deeply recognized me, and it felt special to them for me to be in their life. It was like I was different. And so for reflectors, it's so important in their entourage to have people that can be themselves around them. they can pick up on that like crazy when somebody is authentic, and it's so rare for them. They're here to really see uniqueness in a world that is so drab and homogenized. It's like, ooh, this is so surprising and beautiful. So to have somebody who can be themselves around them, and also being accepted, the reflector can be accepted for who they are in the moment. Their changing nature can be embraced by the other. This person in your entourage respects your connection to the moon and also your need for time. So anybody who is in the life of a reflector really needs to understand that they need time. I mean, whether it's somebody who has emotional authority, they need time to wait for clarity. There's like different configurations in design where a person will need time. But I mean, a reflector really needs that lunar cycle, especially for the big things in life, to be able to really know what is correct for them or not. And of course, once again, this person is a nourishing force or not. The reflectors are really like the canary in the coal mine, where they are the barometers of health or lack thereof in any given environment or community. So what ends up happening to them is they can be kind of like that, either like the canary in the coal mine or the frog in the boiling pot of water. And it's only after the fact, it's too late when they realize that they have really been immersed in a very toxic environment. And that's what can happen when you end up making spontaneous decisions, saying yes to things without being given sufficient time. It could be really devastating for a reflector to be living in an unhealthy environment. So that's just kind of like a little bit about that. And it all leads here. Live your design, align to your trajectory, and find your fractal. So just as we all have this trajectory, our own personal path in this life, we also have in our geometry, the very geometry of our beings, other beings who are meant for us. It's our fractal family. We all have fractal family. So correct behavior, to really kind of bring everything home. Correct behavior has nothing to do with modifying your behavior to live up to a certain standard, modifying your behavior so that you don't stand out, kind of like bringing back that first quote, with the jungle, and why I said it could really be misconstrued, because there could be so much that is just mentally contrived. I have to modify my behavior. I need to act this way. I need to not rock the boat. I need to hide who I am. All of these things, so many things that are just our conditioned nature. Whether like any of the open or undefined centers has their own not self narrative, but all of these ways in which we can strive mentally to have the correct behavior. But I did everything right. Well, your mechanics don't lie. You can mentally think that you have done everything right, but the only thing that's going to show it to you is what actually happens. The resistance on our path or lack thereof is everything that we need to know. So it has nothing to do with mentally correct behavior or behavior that stems from your own belief systems or belief systems that were imposed on you or that you've adopted, but it really has to do with aligning to who you are. Some final words. While not everything will work out to your mind's satisfaction, when you align to strategy and authority, you will have the correct behavior for your own survival, enter into the correct relationships, and receive the correct forces of conditioning. You will get to experience the beauty of your signature and live out the life meant for you as yourself. Don't take my word for it. This is an invitation for you to experiment with the mechanics of your own design. So thank you so much for joining me. Did you enjoy this video? More to come when the time is right. Would you like to learn more about your unique human design or to join my next Living Your Design Awakening experience? If I may be of service on your path, I invite you to reach out and connect. www.melaniehalpert.com.